tossers have thrown it out the door with their behaviour this week. They should be ashamed of themselves. They should absolutely look at themselves in the mirror and wonder what the have they been doing. They're hissing at us and calling us cheats in the Lord's long room, and they have the gall to say, talk to us about the spirit of cricket. Absolute bullshit.
There's a big appeal, it's hit him on the pad, he's out! Lions gone, New South Wales are 9 down! Onto Sydney Road, and it's hit a car! Oh, I think it's hit a car! What a way to bring up your 50!
All you want is to leave it all behind. Now there is a simple remedy to stay fit for all eternity.
Hello everybody and welcome back to Cricket Unfiltered, the longest running cricket podcast in Australia. I'm your host, Menners. Joining me is Damien Watson. Damien, welcome back. How are you?
Good to be with you, Menners. I've got my arm in a sling just in honour of Chris Woakes, and that's why I've got one arm present here today, which is all I need for this podcast. Didn't quite work out for England, but what a climax to that match, and what a series it was too.
Absolutely. You've come out to bat in one arm. Love it. You're right. And, another week, another Bazball fail. It was a great test match, but this is another example of where Baz and Stokes have failed to get the chocolates yet again. Since this new revolutionary mode of test cricket, they haven't beaten India and they haven't beaten Australia in a test series yet. So the litmus test will come this summer. But England had that game and that series in the palm of their hands. When you think about in the fourth test where Jadeja hung on and batted for a draw, and then in this test match where they seemingly were cruising to victory and they lose 7 for 66 to collapse, to be all out and lose the test by 6 runs. This is a triumph for India. This is a testament to their spirit. They never give up. But this is also proof that the English team, despite, as they would say, trying to save test cricket, that's fine, but they're not getting any results. And I think this puts more pressure on them heading into the Ashes.
I noticed too, Menners, your tweet did the rounds. Bazball fails to win another series, about 3 laughing emojis, followed by well played India. You got 496 retweets and 8,900 likes, along with 111 comments. So well done to you, my friend.
Thank you. Yeah, some of the English people didn't see the humorous side to that tweet. Unfortunately,
you got much abuse. Usually, it's the Indian crowd that give you abuse. Menners, they're probably praising you.
The Indian crowd are normally very polite, but the English crowd, they actually gave it to me as well after last week's episode where I criticized them for Handshake Gate. But yeah, I mean, you're right. It was a terrific end to the test match. So, that fifth day, for those who didn't see it, England needed 35 runs with 4 wickets in hand on the 5th day. And in about 56 minutes of play, England lost the game. India won by 6 runs. And it was an absolute masterclass for Mohammad Siraj and Prashid Krishna. Siraj taking 5 wickets, Krishna 4 wickets. And they bowled India to victory. And, it's interesting. There was a little rain break on day 4 and it ended early, so they couldn't finish the game on day 4. And in the end, that actually played into India's hands because the conditions on day 5 were still very good to bowl. It was overcast. The ball was swinging around, but Siraj and Krishna had been able to rest all night, so they could just bowl unchanged on day 5, whereas I'm not sure they'd been able to bowl unchanged through to the end if it had been played on day 4. So it ended up working in India's favour. Ball was hooping around. And we had, England had that run chasing control. Root and Brooke had played beautifully. They'd gone at almost a runner ball, Brooke better than a runner ball. And they had been in total command. Brooke plays a bad shot. And then Jacob Bethel played an absolute shocker, a T20 shot to get out on the 4th afternoon. And then on the 5th day, Jamie Smith, was running at the ball second over, getting out caught behind. So, England only had one way and, they should have iced that game. And it just, It just shows how good this Indian side is at never giving up. We've seen it in Australia before.
Do you think it's a psychological thing with England as well, Metters? Do you think, when they sense a little bit of pressure, they can capitulate pretty easily still? Because that's often been the criticism of England at times when they come up against quality opposition, that once the seed of doubt is planted, sometimes a collapse precipitates.
Look, I just don't think their style of cricket is pressure tested. Whenever it's put under pressure, it fails. It's good at beating up the lesser nations, but it's not good when it's against another team that's going to push them all the way. So, yeah, look, England have played well at times in this series, but I think 2-2 is a fair result. 3-1 would have flattered England, and 2-2 is about right. I've got to say, Gambier, the India coach, needed that. Because let's not forget, India lost at home to New Zealand. They lost the Border Gavaskar Trophy here. If they'd lost this series 3-1, it would have been more pressure on his coaching. And Shubman Gill, his first series as captain, what an emergence from him. 754 runs, 4 centuries, averaging 75 with the bat as captain. And then for them to fight all the way to the end and get that 2-2 series draw, that's a credit to him. And he seems to have shades of Virat Kohli. He seems more in the Kohli mold than the Rohit Sharma mold as captain. And it was a great climax to that series. But India fairly were able to draw it, and the right result.
Great for Test cricket as well, Metters. I mean, it's been a big talking point as to where the future of Test cricket lies. And I think there was a good tweet that was placed out as well. Can't remember who it was, but basically, it was Nasser Hussain, actually, who mentioned it on the coverage on Sky Sports, basically saying that, on days like this, you have an ever-present reminder that there's a great responsibility in Australia, England and India to preserve Test cricket and make sure it doesn't become a big three type contest. And yeah, and I think for me it solidified the fact that I'm not a big fan of the 2-division format, and I think we need a situation where some of the bigger teams, even if it means, you play a lesser squad in terms of quality, give them exposure to some of the minnows. It enables the minnows to get exposure to some of the top teams, and that obviously exponentially increases the level of and quality of Test cricket in some of the minnow nations. Because when it's done right, Metters, it's the best form of cricket and probably one of the best spectacles in sport for the purist.
Absolutely. That was so exciting. The fact that England were 1 hit away from tying the game, which would have ensured a series victory, and Gus Atkinson the last wicket out. And we saw Chris Woakes come to the crease, dislocated shoulder, so he was going to bat left-handed. His arm was strapped up. He was in incredible pain, and it was very brave what he did. And I'm glad we didn't get to see him face up, because, if I'm India, what do you do? Do you try and bounce him? Do you try and just bowl him? Or what do you do? Because if you pitch the ball up, he's going to try and swing left-handed. Whereas if you bounce him, what's he going to, he's probably going to be in some trouble. So it would have been interesting to see the way that was approached. And look, I'm glad we didn't in the end.
And the thing is, I've spoken to people who've dislocated their shoulders in footy. It's actually the running that's even worse sometimes than just when you hold it in general. You feel like it's dangling about, and you actually feel very queasy, believe it or not, when you're running around with a dislocated shoulder. So quite courageous for him to go out there. But when the series is on the line, your country needs you, he was there.
Yeah, very gutsy stuff. There was some discussion after the 4th test around injury subs in Test cricket, and I think that was after Rishabh Pant missed most of the last Test match because of his injury. But there was some discussions, and Ben Stokes was asked at the media conference after the 4th test, does he want to see injury subs in Test cricket? And he was vehement. He said no, he doesn't think you could police it at Test cricket. So he can't complain then at the end of this 5th test. But England did have to play without Chris Woakes for most of that Test match. Now, that is part of the vagaries of Test cricket. I personally do think that they should look at injury subs. I know they're going to trial it at first class level this summer. The thing is, Ben Stokes made the point that if you have an MRI, most bowlers will have something wrong with them at any one time. So you could game the system and say, oh, my shoulder's a bit gone, and it's just an existing problem. And I was thinking the only way you would get around that is you would have to scan every player before every test match. So you had a base level, and then you could see if anything had changed during the game. But as if they're going to be able to do that, give every player an MRI. So I do think Ben Stokes has got a point. You've always got to think about people trying to get around the system, and every bowler would take a hotspot into a game most of the time that they could, for example, if conditions weren't in their favor, go, oh, all of a sudden this is hurting, I need to be replaced.
Yeah, completely agree. It just leaves it open to exploitation. So I'm pretty adamant as well that we don't put it in. And also, I mean, you're never going to get a situation like that in the future if you bring that in. I mean, what about the theatre of Chris Woakes coming out? I mean, you don't get that in most other sports.
Yeah, it's true. A couple of other things. So in that chase, Joe Root brought up his 39th test century. His numbers just keep getting better and better. Harry Brook brought up his 10th century. Interestingly, he wasn't dropped on the boundary, but early on in his innings, he hooked one down to Mohammad Siraj, who took the catch but then stepped on the rope. So Brook got a life early. Then he peeled off 100 off 91 balls. And that was his 10th test century in just 30 matches. That goes along with 13 50s. So he's averaging 57.55 at a strike rate of 87.52. So they are impressive numbers from Harry Brook. And, he's, I guess, one player that Australia will fear this summer. That combination of Root and Brook is the danger combo for Australia. But I think what else we saw from this result is that, as I said it before, Bazball doesn't work in these long test series. Rick Finlay brought up a good stat that England spent 971 more minutes in the field than India. So that's 16 hours and 11 minutes. So it's all well and good batting very quickly if you're England, but it never gives their bowlers time to rest. And we saw by the end of the summer, England were falling apart, as were India in a little bit, but still Siraj and Krishna had enough there to get the win. So, this Bazball again fails. It's another indictment on McCullum's coaching and Stokes' captaincy that they can't win the big series. And I do think it ramps up the pressure for the Ashes because, I said it, I want McCullum and Stokes to go back jobless. And that could happen now because if they lose the Ashes, it's another big series with no results. They could just get fed up with this arrogance and this way of playing that doesn't get a big win.
Yeah, it'd be interesting. I don't know if they're going to change their method, though. They've been doing it for so long, and they could make the argument, well, we've come close on many occasions, but they haven't necessarily taken that next step, have they? I think it's a good point that Rick Finlay makes because fatigue, you can't underestimate the effect of fatigue, and it's also something that's difficult to measure, particularly amongst your bowling attack manners. So, in a fine line type situation where there's only 6 runs in it, maybe that does... When concentration's a big thing in Test cricket, maybe that does make the difference between two sides.
Absolutely. And I've got a few takeaways from the series leading into the Ashes. So, and my takeaways about the English side specifically. So I think we knew this, but it's confirmed. England's strength is their batting, which is a nice matchup against our bowling, and our weakness is maybe our top order, where England has a pretty strong and solid top 7, where there's a few question marks over our top 7, especially the top 3. So that's where the strengths and weaknesses match up. Robert Craddock made a very good point to Gerard Whateley that we keep talking about how England are playing on these flat pitches, and it'll be interesting to see how their batting goes on our more lively pitches. And Crash made a good point. Don't forget, that could also apply to England bowlers. So we think England bowling is weak, but they're playing on these flat pitches, which isn't doing them any favors. So how will Josh Tongue and Bryden Cast and Gus Atkinson do on our pitches that move around a bit? Personally, I think Gus Atkinson is a very good bowler, and he could perform a little, not as well as Scott Boland, but I can see him nipping the ball around on Australian pitches akin to a Scott Boland does it. So he could be a real danger player for Australia. So, I think I'm cautious of not underestimating their bowling because of the conditions they're playing in as a way of not overestimating their batting as well. Do you think that's a fair point?
I think it's a very fair point. Having said that, for a number of these players, if they have limited experience on these pitches too, it's still going to take them a while to understand the idiosyncrasies of each pitch. It's probably not as prevalent, the differences between each pitch as it used to be in Australia, but it still does take some time to adapt to. So I don't know if it'll be as instantaneous, that effect of how the bowlers can get the most out of those pitches, the English bowlers, that is. I don't think it'll be instantaneous right from the very start.
Well, that's it.
I could prove them wrong, but that'd be my doubt cast.
Yeah, a lot of question marks over their bowling. Another takeaway from the series is Ben Stokes cannot play long-term as a test all-rounder. His body just cannot keep up with it. He was out for the 5th test because he hurt his shoulder. I just don't think England can expect him to play a big role as an all-rounder this summer in the Ashes. So, is he going to becoming someone like a Mike Brealey type character who was like a specialist captain, didn't do much because Stokes, although made 100, his batting form has been on the decline. We saw how well he bowled against India, but I just don't think he can do that. So that's, I think, going to really factor into England's plans for the Ashes. Stokes is just not going to be that all-rounder. Also, I think as well, and this is a reason I'm more confident about the chances in the Ashes for Australia, is England's catching was bad. They dropped 6 catches a couple of days ago in that 5th test. Overall, during the series, England catching was bad, and symptomatic of them, as you say, just not being able to finish off matches in pressure situations in this game. So, in this series. So, yeah, my takeaways are I'm feeling more confident for Australia now. More confident, because I thought England needed to win at home against India, and they should have won at home against this young Indian side. They didn't, and I just think we're going to be too good for England again. And I can see it actually being a bit of a disaster for England. I really can.
I'm not as confident in that same way, Metters. I don't think I've changed really since the start of the England v India series. I think they'll take a lot of fortitude out of the series and the fact that it was so competitive.
Yeah,
and they do have enough time to recalibrate before the summer here in Australia. So I'm probably unchanged. I still see them as a bit of a threat. It's probably more so due to the lack of depth in Australia's batting order, unless can make consistent runs, and Labuschagne regains a bit of form. Khawaja, if he gets picked, regains a bit of form, or someone like a Jake Weatherald steps out of the breach. I'm not as confident about Australia's batting, because that was always the one how Australia would set the tone at the top of the order.
And I agree. If England can have Australia 2 for 20 quite a lot in the Ashes, then that's going to open the door a little bit. But as I said, I thought this England team was getting better, and this series against India, they've kind of stalled. So look, I loved it. I was in my Indian shirt on Monday night Australian time, cheering on India, and just to see England cough it up at the end there, it was joyous. Baz McCullum and Ben Stokes trying to put on a brave face in the post-match interviews, but you could tell they knew it. They'd stuffed it up again. They didn't get to lift the Anderson Tendulkar trophy. I think because India won the last series against these teams, they should have had the Anderson Tendulkar trophy. At the end, there was no photo of the Indian team with the trophy. It was a bit hollow, but in the end, great stuff from India, and a great series, and looking forward to the Ashes. Going to take a quick break, but before we do that, Damien, international cricket is coming to Australia this Sunday. Can you believe it? The cricket season's here. You think it was the middle of winter. It's not. Australia plays 3 T20 games against South Africa. The first one is this Sunday in Darwin. The second one is Tuesday night. And the third one is Saturday, August 16th in Cairns. I think this is fantastic. One of Australia's great assets is we have such a good climate. You can play cricket all year round, and I think it's fantastic. Apparently I heard Todd Greenberg saying that the first match is almost sold out in Darwin. This is great for the locals, Damien, and look, let's not kid ourselves. These are not going to make a big impact. They're not on free-to-air TV. They're behind the paywall. But I still think it's worthwhile Australia playing these games in winter to free up time in the summer.
Yeah, I think it's a great asset. I'm surprised it hasn't been utilised more in the past, to be honest. We're seeing a lot of Premier cricket level players play. They have a couple of series, a T20 series, and a lot of cricket being played in Darwin during the traditional winter. So
the NT strike.
Yeah, that's right. So I think if you can utilise it, why not? And gets you acclimatised as well to the warmer weather. People like going up there as well. I'm surprised it hasn't been done more often in recent times. It looks like it's going to be a bit more of a fixture going forward, playing international series, mini ones at the very least in Darwin over the next couple of years. Bangladesh are going to come, I think, next year. Remember, we had that series. I think there were a few series in the NT in the mid-2000s. Bangladesh came for a 2-test series and 3-match one-day series in 2003. Sri Lanka came for a 2-test match series in 2004. Bangladesh came for a few one-dayers back in 2008. That was when Andrew Simons was caught fishing, wasn't he, when he was supposed to be in training. There's been a history of it, but good to see it back in Darwin in particular. I know there's going to be games in Cairns as well, in far north Queensland, but it's been a while since we've seen this level of cricket in Darwin.
Yeah, absolutely. So Australia playing South Africa. South Africa led by Aiden Markram. Of course, South Africa were the T20 World Cup finalists in the last edition, losing to India. Probably, the key storylines for Australia are just trying to firm up that top order ahead of the T20 World Cup next year. Matt Short returns to the squad after missing the series in the West Indies, so he should slot in up the top of the order where Mitch Marsh and Glenn. Well, it'd be actually interesting because Glenn Maxwell and Mitch Marsh opened in the West Indies, and the opening partnership has been Matt Short and Travis Head, so they might both go to the top of the order, which means Mitch Marsh will probably slot in at number 3 again. Mitch Marsh, I wouldn't say pressure on him, but he wouldn't want to have a quiet series. He didn't make many runs against the West Indies, and now that he's playing just as a batter, he does need to perform. There's so many good players on the periphery looking to get in that top order, Mitch Owen, one of them. So, probably Marsh will want to score a few runs. Head and Hazelwood back for Australia, and looking forward to seeing Brevis and Stubbs for South Africa. But a bit of winter entertainment. I wouldn't say a lot riding on this overall, just preparation for the T20 World Cup.
Yeah, that's right. Be interesting to see how the pitch plays as well. I think at the main Marara ground, it was pretty. Wouldn't say it was the flattest pitch of all time, but it was very much favouring the batsman. So I wonder if it'll be the same again or whether they put a bit more moisture in it coming into this series.
And look, if you want some more cricket season actually, so I'm recording this on Wednesday night. Cricket season starts tomorrow because Australia A v India A in the women's game are playing in Mackay on tomorrow night as we record this. So cricket season starts tomorrow. Elisa Healy will be playing for Australia A, trying to get some match practice ahead of the World Cup later this year after her injury. All right, we're going to take our first break, and then we will be back with the announcement of an exciting new launch of the MCG, the Menners Consulting Group. You're listening to the Cricket Unfiltered podcast. I am Menners. I'm with Damien Watson. And Damien, so I've been thinking about this a lot over the last week or so since the results, or not the results, but since the publicity around the Boston Consulting Group's view of the Big Bash came back. A couple of things. I think in hindsight, that report is such a big waste of time and a big waste of money. And I don't know why they got somebody in who clearly doesn't know about cricket, doesn't know about the intricacies of the Big Bash to make this report. Honestly, AI could have generated this report. You could just go to ChatGPT and say, give me ideas to make the Big Bash better. So I'm going to launch the MCG, the Menners Consulting Group, and specifically I will consult on the Big Bash if needed.
How are you going to do it? Are you going to interview people or what? I don't know. With consultants, you sort of.
Well, I'd like Cricket Australia to engage me instead of the Boston Consulting Group.
What are you going to do with your consultation? Will you consult with the community? Will you consult with the decision makers?
They want to know how to take the Big Bash to the next level. So if they're going to go to the Boston Consulting Group, who say, "Oh, get more stars in. Look at getting more teams. Look at private ownership." I mean, that was like the lowest hanging fruit I've ever seen. I mean, it was. I don't know why Todd Greenberg and Cricket Australia, who are very smart people, thought they could go to some consulting group, who are very good consulting group, Boston Consulting Group, but they know nothing about cricket in this country. They know nothing about the vagaries of the Australian summer. All they did was come back and say, "Oh, you should make Australian players available." Okay, how are you going to do that, BCG? Do you want us to cancel the Boxing Day test and the New Year's test? No, we can't do that. Oh, play into February. No, we can't do that because it's been proven in the past the Big Bash dies in February. It's just the vagaries of Australian summer. December, January, peaks at the end of January, and then everyone goes back to school and goes back to work in February, and that is never going to change. You are not going to get huge crowds at the Big Bash in February. So I don't know why they need to go to pay all this money to Boston Consulting Group to find out information. Anybody could tell them. They could have listened to Cricket Unfiltered to get some of this stuff. I mean, it's such low-hanging fruit. I just frustrated. So I'm launching the MCG. I'm taking in investors. So
venture capital investors, yes.
And look, we'll expand. We'll consult on all matters of cricket, but we'll start with the BBL and the WBBL. I will obviously interview stakeholders and experts. But we're looking for seed funding because look, if Boston Consulting Group, I mean, they probably got paid. I'm telling you, they would have got paid hundreds of thousands of dollars for that report came in. And it was jack shit.
Did Cricket Australia want an independent lens, someone who maybe they deliberately wanted someone who didn't know much about the game who could come up with fresh ideas, Metters?
They're bullshit because the thing is, it is so complex the way the sport's different formats interact that you can't just look at the Big Bash through one lens. The fact is, you got to look at the whole Australian cricket summer. And my thoughts around it are, you just have to accept the imperfections of the Big Bash. The fact is, the international summer is going to end at the end of the Sydney Test, and you probably won't get your Test players even then because they'll be going to another tour. You have to get your Australian white ball players in the Big Bash, which they've done in the last 2 years, your Zampas, your Maxwells, your Stoinis. You have to pay them enough to keep them in the comp. And you maybe need to get a few more international stars, but mainly you need to keep them for the whole competition so it maintains some integrity. I don't think there's actually many superstars out there anymore that you want to get. And I guess the real thing, which I didn't see in the Boston Consulting Group, because I don't know cricket because they're idiots, is that the way you could really increase value in the Big Bash is somehow get the Indian players in. If you can do a deal with the BCCI where they get some kind of ownership and it's the IPL and the Big Bash where the Indian players feature, that is how you can supercharge it. It's probably not going to happen, but that is how you do it.
Well, it'd be a bit like what the NBL
I want to
has
see Nick's Poran play in another T20 tournament. No, it's boring.
Well, it's a bit like what the NBL has done to a certain degree in Australia in terms of establishing a bit of a partnership with the NBA and feeding off that. I think that's probably a good point in the sense that, there's the rise of the Indian middle class and Indian migration into Australia, Metters. If you can bring some big name Indian people and players into the game here, you're going to get the crowds and you're going to get the attention. And you would also get, probably the other aspect of it is, it's not just domestic attention, it's global. You get eyeballs in India. Absolutely. Imagine if some of the bigger players during a period where it's a bit quiet over there around that December period, imagine all the millions of people watching on from overseas, from India, Sri Lanka, and the subcontinent in general.
Oh, if Australia could get access to some of the best Indian players, I mean, it would make the Big Bash the second best comp in the world, hands down. Anyway, so that's my takeaway. I talked briefly last week about the Boston Consulting Group, but I've slept on it. I've done more research into it. And as I said, just absolute horse shit. So if you want to get involved with the MCG, the Manners Consulting Group, and you want to invest in seed funding, get in touch. We're going to revolutionise cricket. But if BCG can do it, what?
You'll keep it direct. No
That's
bullshit
it.
would be your motto.
Absolutely. All right. So that's the MCG launch.
I like it.
A couple of other things, a bit of cricket news. So the 100 begun overnight. I don't know if you're a 100 fan, Damien.
Yeah.
I do think as time goes on, the 100 becomes more and more of a white elephant. I don't mind doing things differently. I don't mind walking to a different beat. But now it just seems to me odd that you've got this T20 competition that's 100 balls instead of 120 balls. That's essentially what it is.
Having said that, though, Menners, they will keep an eye on it this season as to what happens. But if you're still getting local interest and a lot of people to the game, because that's probably been the point of difference that it's got compared to a lot of other tournaments in England, is you get the crowd factor, you get the young families in. That's its purpose, right? You're attracting, you're trying to attract
quick games. They're quick games, yeah.
So as long as they can do that, it's serving its purpose. It doesn't matter if it really gains much international interest or anything like that. It's the product itself as opposed to the quality of the cricket or the rules of the cricket.
I just think broadly speaking, it's just this white elephant, though, on the cricket calendar where that instead
not
of...
a white elephant that people are turning up, though, Menners. And the fact is, if you go to the UK... if you look at the interest in cricket over the last 30 to 40 years, it's dwindled over time. So any excuse to get more and more people, I think it serves its purpose. That's just my opinion.
Yeah. I should put up the Premier League on the screen. Like, just tell them they'll put the Premier League on and they'll show up.
Well, the advantage you have with the cricket is you can drink beer at the cricket. You can't do that at the English Premier League.
Now, I read an article on Cricket Info from Matt Roller. So, obviously, recently, a lot of the franchises or the franchises were sold off to private ownership. This is what has motivated them to look at private ownership for the Big Bash. But Matt Roller says this season is a period of transition for the 100. So a lot of the private owners actually haven't taken over yet. And that won't happen till next year. And there'll also be name changes. So this is kind of the last season where the 100 is what it is until it sort of metamorphoses into the new version under private ownership. For Australia, we've got a lot of players over there. David Warner's playing at the London Spirit. Steve Smith is playing for the Welsh Fire. Chris Green is for the Welsh Fire. The Trent Rockets has Marcus Stoinis. For Birmingham, you've got Elise Perry, Megan Shute, and Georgia Vole. Beth Mooney's playing for the Manchester Originals. So a ton of stars over there to watch if you're an Australian fan. Steve Smith did some press before the launch of the tournament saying that he wants to use these domestic T20 tournaments as a launch pad to get back into that Australian T20 side and potentially play in the Olympics. And, you know, now that Smith is retired from international one-day cricket, he will be free to play more in these T20 competitions. And when I look at someone like Mitch Marsh, who's captain of Australia's T20 side at the moment, I think Steve Smith is probably a better captain. Like I wouldn't discount Steve Smith coming back into that Australian T20 side as captain for next year's T20 World Cup. Australia's got a ton of power hitters. Smith is still batting very well, can turn the strike over, and is a tactical genius. You know, so why wouldn't you look at him in the top order of Australia's T20 World Cup side? So if you can have a big 100, that could be the first step.
Yeah, he's certainly shown that he's turned things around in regards to the Big Bash League as well. I mean, how good was he as soon as he stepped into the breach in January, Menners? And not just with his hitting power, but also his cricketing nous as well. I think it comes down to whether he wants to do it with his current workload, he's getting a bit older, etc. I think it's really down to his own desires. It's an interesting point you make about players like Mitch Marsh, who in the future might go down the path of just playing franchise cricket. I was reading an article last week, player that we both like, Amanda Jade Wellington. She came out and said that effectively she's probably at a point where she prefers playing franchise cricket rather than actually representing the Australian team. Now, I think maybe a part of that is because, you know, she feels probably a bit slighted that she has been overlooked for a fair period of time when she possibly deserved to get in. But it's interesting how attitudes can change over time as to where cricketers' preferences are.
Yeah, absolutely. And, so many cricketers have that option now where they didn't, which I think is fantastic. There's just more professional cricketers now than ever making a living. So you're right. And if you're not getting international recognition, it doesn't matter. So that's the 100. That started overnight. Meg Lanning in the first game made 85 off 51. Grace Harris, 89 not out off 42 balls. That was her London. So Grace Harris is playing for the London Spirit, and they beat Meg Lanning's Oval Invincibles. But yeah, that's pretty good. They do it the double header, which we've talked about in the past. They play the women and then the men, and you can
Back
go there and so you can always catch a lot of the 100 if you're up late in Australia, because the women kick off a bit early and then the men are after that. All right, so I think that's all the cricket news this week, Damien. As I said, the cricket season starts tomorrow with India A taking on the Australian Women's A side. So, really looking forward to that. Next week, when we convene, Australia would have played 2 T20s against South Africa.
Yeah, looking forward to seeing how it's going to be received up in the Northern Territory as well. Hopefully there's a good crowd. You're right, in terms of it being behind a paywall, it'll be interesting to see what sort of coverage it gets, given it's in the middle of the footy season as well, man. It was a bit different back in the mid-2000s when it used to be on free-to-air when they played those series in the Northern Territory. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, it's a real shame that it's not going to be on free-to-air television. And the more and more that deal goes on, the more and more damage it does to the white ball formats. There was a good point made around Adam Zampa, who's played 100 games for Australia in T20 cricket now and one-day cricket, and most of his career has been behind a paywall. And most regular Australians don't know how well is done for Australia, even in those World Cups. A lot of those games are behind paywalls. So, yeah, Correct. It really is. Just one of those things, unfortunately. All right, time for Can't Let It Go. That little bit of cricket news you just can't let go through to the keeper. And my Can't Let It Go, I'll start, is Westpac have now sponsored cricket, which is fantastic. But they've got now a big Westpac logo on the front of the Australian Test shirt. Now, my issue is the logo is red. The ball they play cricket with is red. If I'm an opposition player and I've got Mitchell Starc running in with the red ball and he's got a red logo on his shirt, I'm saying to the umpire, I don't like that. I don't know if you remember when Dean Jones asked Curtly Ambrose to remove his sweatbands at the SCG. Yeah, it's got those vibes. You've got the ball there. And so I can see there being an issue with having a red logo across the front of your shirt and playing with a red ball. Very
but
appreciative.
Didn't the West Indies wear red for a long period of time in the one-day format?
Test cricket. Yeah, but the white ball.
Yeah, I suppose you're right. But I'm just trying to think if there's been anyone else that had a. I know Australia.
You can't. No. There's only white clothes in Test cricket, Damien.
No, but the red logo, because they have big sponsors in the middle now. But
never a big red logo like that. Yeah. Anyway, that's my Can't Let It Go. Really glad Westpac supporting cricket, but could be a few issues with their logo.
My Can't Let It Go, just on that Australia A v India A series that's coming up with the women. Interesting to see how some of those players challenging for selection will go. And I know that, as you said, Elisa Healy's probably the big name coming back in to obviously recuperate and get back into cricket after an injury. But be interesting to see how players like Tess Flintoff go, been named in the squad. You got players like, the younger brigade, Lucy Hamilton, who's been called up. Talia Wilson's going to try and make a bit of a run. It'll be interesting, that battle for, and I know Beth Mooney's the standing keeper for when Healy does retire. You'd think she'd be the next cab off the rank, but she's still coming towards, she's probably closer to the end than she is to the beginning. Be interesting to see who the next generation keeper is. And I reckon it's realistically, I know Georgia Redmayne's probably been a bit unlucky over the journey, but it'd be realistically between Nicole Fulton and Talia Wilson. And if Wilson can make runs, she's a very good keeper as well. It'd be an interesting battle, I reckon, between those two down the track.
Yeah, friend of the podcast had Talia on season before last, where we did a special WBBL interview. Fantastic cricketer. Yeah, that's a good shout out, Damien. And I'm really glad the cricket season is starting tomorrow because the Swans season is over in the AFL.
Yep.
So now I can get focused back on cricket. And now it's just non-stop cricket till the end. So cannot wait. Damien, thanks very much for joining me. You were missed last week. I don't know if you heard. You got a shout out from Jono. He shouted you out, so you clearly didn't hear it.
Good on you, Jono.
But where can the listeners keep up with you this weekend?
Well, I'll be doing I did a fair bit of footy last weekend, which was fantastic, but doing a bit of footy this weekend at Damo_Watts on Twitter.
Great. Well, everybody, thanks for tuning in to the Cricket Unfiltered podcast. What a week. I mean, I got to say, started so well with England losing. I just got such a boost out of it. I would have felt so bad for India had they lost to that horrible
8,900 likes, Menners, for you as well.
Yep.
That would have helped the dopamine for you.
Absolutely, definitely. But we'll be back next week with another podcast. Don't forget, some great Cricket Unfiltered merchandise on sale. Exactamundo are helping out with that. So all the details are in the episode notes. If you want to work with me, if you want to get some merchandise, Mel in Yorkshire, I shared it. He's been wearing the Cricket Unfiltered shirts to Yorkshire Cricket Club. And actually, Mel has turned me around on the English. Like, I am really trying ahead of the Ashes. Like, there are some nice English cricket fans. I've got to try and be positive. I've got to try and be glass half full. And
because today's been a good springboard for that for you, hasn't it?
Yeah, not tarnish all English cricket fans with the same brush. But Mel, sporting Cricket Unfiltered shirts at Yorkshire games is great. So go and get one. We'll also be coming out with special, Ashes themed T-shirts to wear at the cricket this summer. No doubt there'll be, anti-Baz or anti-Stokes in some ways. But yeah, thanks everybody for tuning in. Thanks, Damien, and we'll be back soon.